Council. I have a couple of submissions here.
Lord.
I'd like to start with the definition of a row house I googled. Single-family dwelling units attached to one another by common walls, generally with a common facade. Identical, uniform houses, which are usually found in cities with high density, not in bedroom communities, generally smaller and less luxurious than a townhouse, similar to tenement buildings. Most of them look like low-income government housing. Definition of a townhouse: non-uniform units, a fashionable row house, an upscale row house, a house in town, constructed with different features than surrounding joined units, designed to be unique. Townhouse is an overall term, and row house is a subset. I'm very concerned regarding the proposed RT2 townhouse zone amendment in regards to the increased height from 2 stories to 3 stories, and what appears to be a lack of design guidelines in respect to townhouse development on this ground. The amendment to the current bylaw would affect all of Coquitlam, but I believe in particular could have a negative impact on the expansive ongoing development of Burke Mountain. I sat on city planning committees for both Upper Hyde Creek and Smiley Creek for about 6 years. The OCPs are a vision, but a fairly detailed vision for development. Yes, there would be some changes to be expected, however, it appears that this height increase will permit the possibility of development of unfettered row houses throughout Burke Mountain in areas zoned for RT2 townhouse development, similar to Tappan development behind Victoria Drive Park. I've yet to talk to anyone who sees these row houses and likes them, or even describes them as something other than boring, horrible-looking identical boxes with windows. I understand that as the RT2 bylaw currently is written, development must have variance approval before building 3-story row houses. It appears that by passing the proposed amendments to the current bylaw, developers would not have to get variance approval to put up 3-story row houses. I believe that in the development process, there should be at least design guidelines and approval of townhouse design to accompany any proposed changes to the RT2 townhouse bylaw, in particular for Burke Mountain. The design guidelines and approval process would at least enable these townhouse types to have a better fit and look with the surrounding homes and environment. If there are no design guidelines for Burke Mountain RT2 townhouses, then the vision of the OCP, which committee spent so many hours inputting, discussing, and debating under the current bylaw, could be lost. I personally would like to see the proposed RT2 townhouse amendments defeated and continue to have the developers apply for variances for 3-story row houses, which appears to be as synonymous with townhouse. In that way, the planning department, council, and citizens can be aware of the type of development on Burke Mountain. I believe that if the RT2 amendments pass without design guidelines, there could be a flurry of identical row housing development. Currently, if there is a point at which design guidelines kick in, how will the amendment changes affect or hinder that process? And how will the amendment changes ensure a varied look to any RT2 townhouse or any other zone townhouse development? As I recall, conventional townhouses were to be built in the city center of Burke Mountain and in areas where a large density or cluster of population was to be encouraged around a more commercial type of area. Also, just because the amendments are the norm throughout most of the Lower Mainland should not necessarily guide us in the development of Burke Mountain. Concern has been expressed by one of my neighbors about the proposal to change setbacks at the rear of the property lines backing onto the green space from 25 feet to 10 feet. It was expressed that digging a foundation that close to the property line could damage the shrubbery and trees set aside in environmentally sensitive areas or even within covenant areas. Then at some point the trees within these areas would have to be removed for safety. So if the goal of the amendment is to reduce the setbacks, that should be looked at carefully, particularly in the development of Burke Mountain. Specifically, there is a 10 to 15 unit townhouse development which is being proposed as conventional townhouse. A proposal change from single-family homes along the creek between Queenston and Highland Drive outside the sensitive riparian zone of shrubs and trees and outside a proposed covenant area. I believe that could be open to 3-story townhouse row house development if this bylaw amendment is passed. Single-family or the other street-oriented townhouse zoning would be, in my opinion, possibly a better fit. Regardless, there needs to be design guidelines for all townhouse type zonings in order to preserve the integrity of the OCP visions, particularly for the Burke Mountain area. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Janet Clark. Klopp, and I'm the aforementioned neighbor, Sandra Marston. Yes, I am concerned about row houses being built directly behind my house because I don't think that it's the best place for it in Coquitlam. We've been in that neighborhood a long time, and as the adjacent property owner, I think it's important that I be consulted about what's going right next to my home. The RT2 townhouses are not something that I would like to see at that property. My husband and I we have a renovations company, so it's possible that we would want to develop our own property in the future. Townhouses were not what we were thinking we would want to be doing there. And so I would not want to see a blanket proposal, I guess, across Coquitlam. I would like to see people have to look at the properties involved and address variances. Toward that end also, I am concerned also about this, about the setbacks changing from basically 25 feet to 10 feet, especially adjacent to city-owned or park properties. I've seen that in a couple of instances up on Burke Mountain, and the next thing we knew was those trees the mature trees adjacent to those properties had to be cut down because they were suddenly a danger. And so if you're building homes that close to properties that have mature trees on them, I'm not saying it couldn't happen in all instances, but I think it's something that needs to be considered very carefully. So I'm basically in agreement with Sandra Marston in her feelings, and those we've spoken quite at length about the RT2 townhouse zoning, and we would like to see it very carefully considered before it would be passed as a sort of a unilateral course of action throughout our city, and especially on Burke Mountain. We can't help but feeling a little bit under siege up there because we feel like we're being sort of treated like a blank canvas up there, and we're not. There's some of us who are residents up there. We don't intend to be leaving anytime soon. So we would like us to be considered, and certainly a lot of people worked hard on the OCP committees. I think that their guidance and their visions and their proposals were worthwhile, and I think that we need to consider carefully before we just sort of stroke off that time and energy those people put into that, and say, oh yes, we'll make this amendment for you, without there being some real reasons to do so. Thank you.